Namaste, greetings, and thank you for inviting me to be here with you for this auspicious conference. My name is Dr. Lori Rubenstein Fazzio, and I am the clinical professor of yoga and health at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And we would all like to offer our congratulations to Dr. Ananda, Dr. Meena, and the entire team at Sri Balaji Vidyapith University for the launch of the Institute of Salutogenesis and Complementary Medicine. So I'm very excited to be here with you, and I will go ahead and share my screen. So today I am going to share with you about a few of my favorite practices from the Gitananda lineage. And today I won't be focusing too much on the primary intention of these practices, as Dr. Ananda has extensively shared about them. I'd like to add in a polyvagal perspective on why I think these practices are ideal for optimizing our health and well-being through the lens of polyvagal theory. Now, I'm choosing a couple practices to focus on. Everything that I'll be sharing is applicable to many other practices, and particularly those that involve chanting or vocalization, and thus are applicable to music therapy as well. So as this conference is also about music therapy, what I'll be sharing is applicable to that. So the practices that I'd like to focus on are Brahma Mudra for the neck and Nada Bhavana Shuddhi Kriya, which I first learned and encountered at the Ananda Ashram in Pondicherry back here in, I think, 2017. So Brahma Mudra, as we know, Brahma has 4 heads. And so in this practice, we turn the head in different directions and then chant a bija sound, which a key to this is that most of these sounds have a vowel sound to them. And I'll talk about why that's important for this. And it involves the turning of the head, the chanting of the sound. We are considering different perspectives. And I will go a little bit more into why these particular activities may benefit our what we call vagal tone, which has to do with our autonomic nervous system. And I'll get into that in just a moment. The other practice is the Nada Bhavana Shuddhi Kriya. And this one, we start off on our solar plexus and we do a tapping, which an interesting point is there is a modern practice called emotional, it's EFT, I think it's emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping on specific acupressure points. And there have been over 100 studies on this tapping. You say a mantra or an affirmation, a phrase while you do this tapping. Over 100 studies have shown it to be beneficial in reducing anxiety, depression, and treating PTSD. So I'm curious if the tapping that's involved in this practice may also have such benefits. But we may start on the solar plexus, ha, 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 on the heart area. Ho, 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 ho. He, he. Me, me, me. D. Gather the attention. Go. So as you can see, there's also some vowel sounds. We have the tapping and we're gathering and then throwing into this posture. And again, I will come back to that in just a moment. So a couple points first, little side notes. As I mentioned, vowel sounds. So one of the reasons why vowel sounds can be so helpful in reducing stress is that we have an open vocal tract. So consonants, there's a closing like k, t, l, Vowels, ah, o, u, e. So the most acoustical energy is expressed this way. And I like this little quote here that in poetry, vowels are the vehicles for emotion. So when a baby's upset, you hear, ah, you hear these vowel sounds come out. So these are one of the ways that we can release this kind of pent up tension that we have. So here you see these babies, and you can tell by looking at them that they are not very happy. Part of, if you notice, this is the facial expressions. This is part of what we call our social engagement system. And this is what I will be talking about. So without just looking at the images, without any other information, we can all discern these babies are not happy. Babies don't understand language yet this is their communication through facial expressions. Patanjali told us a long time ago that our sensory organs is how we interact with the world. So we know that these are our sensory organs and our jnana indriyas, mostly in our face, and then also our karma indriyas using our hands and our feet, etc., is how we communicate and interact with the world. And then if you notice these, we also know that these, through their expressions, are not very happy. Notice how there's an inward holding, a closing off on the senses, closing the eyes, closing the ears, inwards. So this is that internal stress state. And that's opposed to when you see here that when we are happy, we are usually open, our posture's open, our mouths are open, and there's this outpouring. So we can tell here, again, these expressions tell us the internal state of these babies. And then also notice here that many times when somebody is in a state of a positive internal state, there is a smile on their face, the open mouth, and the arms are oftentimes in this upward posture. There was a woman who did some research on what she called the power posture, this posture. And while her research has been criticized quite a bit, there is evidence that the posture in which we hold ourselves has an impact on our neuroendocrine chemicals. So take a moment and slouch, like really slouch, a bad posture, get the worst posture you can get, and try to smile. It's very awkward. It's not very authentic to smile when you're in a slouch. Now sit up straight, hold your arms up in the air. Come on, everybody, do this with me, please. Come like this and try to frown. It's awkward, right? So when you're in this posture, your body naturally wants to smile. And when you're slouched, your body naturally wants to feel like it's in a more depressed state of being. So the position we put our body does change our internal state. In fact, it does change our chemicals. If I take this pen, I put it in my mouth, it forces my mouth into the shape of a smile. There was actually some research where they did this. They had people put pens in their mouth, and what they found was they had increased serotonin, increased dopamine, increased endorphins. So all these really kind of happy hormones just from this. So putting your mouth in the shape of a smile has health benefits. Again, this is all part of this social engagement system. So we'll talk a little bit about the social engagement system. This is also, according to Stephen Porges, this is what we call the ventral vagal complex. So I'm going to back up and give a little information about this. And I just want to specify, I do not mean the social media engagement. That's a different type of social engagement. So first off, we're talking about the vagus nerve. That's the primary thing that we'll be talking about. This is that ventral vagal complex I talked about. So the vagus nerve, what is it? It's a cranial nerve. Cranial nerve means it comes out of our brainstem, kind of the base of our brain, primitive part of our brain. And the vagus nerve is the longest one, cranial nerve 10. It innervates every organ in our body, including our heart and our lungs. So you can see this here, every visceral organ. And it's depicted by this yellow here. And again, it's one of the cranial nerves, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that. Vagal tone is when this nerve has the ability to be resilient. So the vagus nerve is known to put the brakes on our stress response. So when we get stressed or under threat, our nervous system becomes active, and the vagus nerve is what calms that back down. So the more that that has the ability to be resilient, so we can become activated and then we come down, that's resilience, and that's called vagal tone. That is associated with improved health. Giving a very brief description of this, but I think most of you already know what vagal tone is. So backing up, it used to be thought that the autonomic nervous system was a binary. So on the right, we have the sympathetic system, and the sympathetic nerves are mostly in our thoracic spine, our middle back. And these, when we are activated, these will divert the blood to our extremities so that we can maybe run or fight, and also makes the heart beat faster. We can get more oxygen to the tissues, etc. And then the opposite would be the parasympathetic system, which is primarily the vagal nerve, but also, as you see up here, involves other cranial nerves and some sacral nerves. This slows everything down. It's oftentimes termed the rest and digest, whereas the sympathetic is the fight and flight, flight or flight. So rest and digest, fight or flight. But Stephen Porges posits it's more complicated than that. He says we really have three systems. So we can freeze up, which is part of the vagus nerve that's called the dorsal vagal. We can mobilize, which is our sympathetic nervous system. And then we have this third part that he adds in called the social engagement. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Ultimately, what he posits is that our nervous system has a capacity of what he calls a neuroception. So our nervous system is evaluating our environment. Are we in danger or are we safe? If our nervous system senses that we're in danger, then this ventral vagal, this put the brakes on, it disengages, that safety key disengages, and we go into survival mode. If it senses our environment safe, then it stays engaged and we have a healthier state of being. So let's look at this a little bit closer. Let's start on here on the right. If our nervous system senses that we are under threat, we can go into the sympathetic nervous system. So that's the fight or flight. And we might look at that as rajas with the gunas, right? That's the activity. We need to be active. We mobilize. If it perceives life threat, and I'm saying perceive because it doesn't mean that it is a life threat. You might be terrified of snakes and you see a stick, you think it's a snake, and so you have a extreme reaction. This could be what we call the freeze response, where you vasovagal syncope, where you just collapse, you play dead. And so that is what he would describe as the dorsal vagal complex. This is the part of the vagus nerve that innervates everything below the diaphragm and causes everything to shut down. We might look at this as tamas in the gunas, the inertia, the lack of movement. Over here on the left, we have, if we perceive safe. So when we perceive safe, the ventral vagal complex. This is the part of the vagus nerve that innervates everything above the diaphragm and interacts with all these cranial nerves, is what I'll get into in just a moment. We can also have safe activities. So that might be when we are engaging in, maybe we go for a run together and we're talking. We have our sympathetic nervous system with our ventral vagal. So this could be sattva, would be the ventral vagal. That's that nice homeostasis and balance, with rajas. So we can be active and sattvic. Or we can have safe immobilization, which is termed intimacy. So this could be two people being vulnerable with each other, feeling safe, and that could be sattva and tamas. So let's say we perceive danger. Our body perceives danger. Here we have the COVID monster coming at us. The ventral vagal disengages and we go into sympathetic fight or flight. Or perceives extreme danger, play dead. Or if we perceive that, like these cute puppies, or I don't even know if this is a puppy here, safe, very nice. Okay, now we have safety, our ventral vagal is active. So again, up here on the left, we have that sattvic ventral vagal. Down here on the bottom, we have people who are feeling safe enough to go into shavasana in a group situation outside. So they're in a sattvic tamas state. And over here on the right, the dancer is using lots of cranial nerve activity with all her facial expressions and even all the gestures, as is this group below, to partner together to create these yogasana pyramids and such. So this would be sattva and rajas, ventral vagal and sympathetic together. So the key point about the social engagement is that it involves facial expressions, gestures, and what we call prosodic vocalizations. So babies and puppies, they don't understand language, but they understand our tone of voice, our face, and our gestures. That's that communication I was talking about. So the prosodic vocalizations, if we a baby or a puppy, we might say, "Oh, you're so cute." And that helps them to feel safe. Whereas if I use a harsh tone and my face gives a sense of unhappy or anger, then the other person may not feel safe. And so if we think about the two practices from the beginning, particularly the Nada Bhavana Shuddhi Kriya, we have gestures, we have these vocalizations, and we have facial expressions as well. And again, I said a little bit earlier, but the facial expressions that we have the capacity to change our neuroendocrine chemicals. So this can actually make us healthier. Now, just going back to the vagus nerve, why does the social engagement, why does that affect the vagus nerve? Well, remember, the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. There are there's 12 cranial nerves. The vagus nerve is 10. Now, the vagus nerve connects in a nucleus called the nucleus ambiguus, and these three nerves connect together. Some say more than these three, but the vagus nerve, the glossopharyngeal, and the accessory. So the accessory nerve is involved in movement of the head, as we have with Brahma Mudra and also Nada Bhavana Shuddhi Kriya. Both of them involve moving the head. And the glossopharyngeal is involved in phonation, vocalization. Both of them have that. So when we do these activities, it is believed that it activates the vagus nerve. So that is the key here as to why these practices may activate vagal tone. Now, there's other nerves as well. So I highlighted down here in yellow the part that is with the nucleus ambiguus, the glossopharyngeal, cranial nerve 9, the accessory 11, and the vagus nerve, which is 10. And then here you'll see in green the facial nerve, cranial nerve 7, and the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5. So facial expression, and also our trigeminal nerve is kind of comes on the side of our face here, but people with TMJ issues, which is oftentimes jaw pain, there's a lot of association with depression and mood, and there's several beliefs in some articles on the sensations in the jaw as well as vagal tone. So what that means is that all these cranial nerves, when we are utilizing them, activating them, there's a potential to enhance our vagal tone. So if we look back at Brahma Mudra here, look at all the cranial nerves that are involved. turning the head, the accessory nerve, phonation, glossopharyngeal, and the hypoglossal, where we put our tongue to make these sounds, some facial expression just to make the vowel sounds, some jaw mouth movement sensation, also the auditory nerve because we're hearing the sound we make, and some eye movement is involved as well. Pretty much the same things with the Nada Bhavana Shuddhi Kriya. So both these practices involve lots of cranial nerves and have the potential to improve vagal tone in that way, as well as the fact that we're expressing our body posture and using the extended exhalation to make the sounds, which is already established that extended exhalation enhances vagal tone. So we don't want to forget about that part also. So multiple reasons why these practices have the potential to enhance our health and well-being through enhancing vagal tone. And I want to leave you with this just kind of side note I thought was very interesting, is that any of you who are medical students oftentimes have mnemonics to memorize the cranial nerve order. Here's one mnemonic. Only one of the two athletes felt very good, victorious, and healthy. So I highlighted in yellow the cranial nerves that are involved in these two practices. And if we look at those, the mnemonic, leaving out the first two, is of the two athletes felt very good, victorious, and healthy. So the message here is, if you want to feel good, feel healthy, feel happy, like you do when you enter Ananda Ashram over here, and instead of feeling sad and angry and closed down, then activate your social engagement system. And these two practices are practices that can be extremely beneficial in doing so. So thank you for having me, and thank you to Dr. Ananda, his father, Dr. Gitananda, and the whole lineage for sharing these practices with the rest of the world. Thank you.